Hey guys, it's me, MidwayJack24 here, and today I'm just going to do a quick switcher up-a-roo on the reactions today. So instead of the French Revolutionary War Part 2, we get the Falkland War, which I'm about going to explain this since pretty much, long story short, a British dude said that I was hurting their feelings and pretty much making them hate America. Which, let's face it, I'm just one dude, not even representing over for 30, over 300 million people. So yeah, so I really shouldn't be one of the people to even make you in America. And plus, I did apologize to them, and then I said that just going to quickly go over this since I really don't have that much time. This is the second time I'm making this video due to someone interrupting me. By that I literally mean someone called me on me, and yeah, I forgot to place my, pretty much, so I had to restart the whole video. I was actually pretty close to actually being done with it. And so pretty much in my apology, I did say that I don't know much about British history, and plus I have been taught with a lot of inaccurate information and false information as well. So yeah, so cut me a bit of slack. Also, I did even tell the people that they shouldn't hate America just because of me, since, it's like if I said I would hate the UK for leaving the EU. It seriously doesn't affect anyone. I said this because, let's face it, the UK already left the EU in 2019, so yeah, that's 2 years ago. And let's face it, I pretty much the UK is literally just not even a country at, no, it is, no, it's a country at this point that I could still care for, but at the same time, it leaving the EU is literally not an issue at all. Oh, and then they said I sounded like a dude named David Bowie, who I never heard talk. And then they said that this is a children's show, in which I did reply, I know it is, and that I said that if it was a problem for me to react to something that I watched, somewhat as a kid, as I watched this while I was actually in my late teens when I watched Horrible Histories, but still, you get the idea at this point. Anyways, without any further ado, let's react to the Falkland Wars. Wars by Oversimplified, and before we begin, as usual, all of the copyright belongs to Oversimplified, as I'm just making a reaction video and no claims whatsoever. And plus, the original video will indeed be in the link below. Anyways, let's begin, my friends, with the Falkland Wars. Just doing a, should actually probably turn that up. And yeah, that seems about right.
Hi, English mariner John Strong. Hi, Anthony Carey, 5th Viscount of Falkland. I would very much like for you to go to Chile and locate the wreck of a Spanish treasure ship for me. Okay. Hey, I found some islands.
Perfect. Now, claim the islands, and now don't let any excuse drive you off the islands, especially if it's one about a line, a pope, and something else.
The English were probably not the first to discover the Falklands, but they were the first to write it down. They found it to be cold, wet, and miserable, just like home.
I'm not sure if that's a direct joke at Brennan itself, or just a direct joke for London. Either one seems likable, since as an American since I did visit Brennan only a couple of times, and it kept on raining whenever I did visit, and yeah, so I found it to be cold, very wet, and somewhat more miserable for my taste, but at the same time, If you're wondering what's going on in the background, it's literally just a washing machine. Yes, it does that. Just don't worry about it. And so yeah, this is just from my American viewing of Brennan, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it's actually like that. So I'm just going to say, if I manage to get any more English folk angry at me, then go ahead, comment away in the comments. I'll be sure to respond in my apologies, which I do out of my own time, which, let's face it, if I didn't have my own time to apologize, I wouldn't be making videos or writing comments apologizing.
Established a colony in 1765, unaware that the French had also discovered the islands and done the same a year earlier. And for a while the two were unaware of each other's existence, until presumably there was an awkward moment where they ran into each other.
Pretty much any cases of me running into my friends whenever I head out to the grocery store and I just see my friends there. It gets very awkward.
Then the Spanish showed up and told the French that a couple hundred years earlier the Pope drew a line on a map and said all of this belongs to Portugal and all of this belongs to Spain.
If I have to say it, I say that in disagreement that Portugal got it better, since Portugal actually did indeed get to colonize Africa. I'm not sure the Spanish got to colonize Africa. If they did, let me know in the comments down below, but at the same time, I don't get it. Pope, line on map, that ain't even accurate at all for this side of North America, but even still, that doesn't sound like the best idea. Even if it did work, then I'm trying to figure out on how the Spanish were able to get Chile, since that's technically past the line. Very confusing.
But the island was in Spain's territory, and they would like the French to hand over their settlement. Now, since the two were good friends, and Spain was willing to pay in cash money...
Yep, Spain was willing to pay in money to the French, since, let's face it, their relationships were a little bit better than it was with England's.
The French obliged, but since they were still a little bitter about the recent 7 Years' War thing...
Oh yeah, 7 Years' War quick summary. Great Britain, Russia, and Russia pretty much fought against the French, the Austrians, and the whatever remained of the Holy Roman Empire across the world. It was essentially like the first world, like it was an actual world war, or the first time major colonies were fighting across in Africa and India, which is part of Asia, not really that much in Australia, but certainly a lot more in North America. But in Europe, France and Austria got destroyed by the Prussians and Russians and English. Yeah, it was a tiny bit of an embarrassing defeat for the French, but let's face it, the French later bounced back and later gained a major victory against the British.
They made sure to warn the Spanish not to let those dirty English on the other side of the island take over. So Spain went over to the English and explained, Pope, line on map, Spain's island, and...
Alright. So you're telling one of the major global empires to leave up their territory just because of Pope, line on map, Spain's island? If you have that logic in mind, then yeah, that's pretty much like tempting a petty feud to begin. Again, over this territory, over for no reason.
English said, yeah, right, this is our island. But the Spanish had more guns, so they kicked them off anyway. But then England threatened to go to war. So Spain went to their friends in France and said, hey, it looks like stuff is about to go down. You in on this? And the French Minister of War said, yeah, and we'll launch a full-scale invasion of England and party like it's 1066.
1066 was the Norman invasion, which actually took over Europe. No, not Europe, which took over England, which turned the English language into what it is today, at least the UK variant. and it pretty much caused England to become somewhat of the country that it's known for today. Other influences were indeed from the Dutch and Germans.
But then King Louis XV said, 1, you're insane, and 2, you're fired.
Good call.
Spain, we're not ready for a war right now. So Spain had to give the English their settlement back, saying it's still our island, and the English said, no, it's our island. Then some colonists in North America got a bit rowdy.
Quick little assessment over the American Revolution. Pretty much we were getting taxed heavily due to being heavily protected by the French during the 7 Years' War, and since we didn't have any proper representation in English Parliament all the way over in Great Britain, we decided to revolt and pretty much become our own country. And with the help of Spain and France, we managed to become an independent country, which is currently as is February 5th, 2021. We're still the global and military, global economic powerhouse, plus the militaristic powerhouse of the world. So yeah. And now, time to finish this off. Oversimplified. Do your rest of your explaining stuff.
The English had to leave their settlement to go focus on that, but they left behind a plaque that said this is totally still our island. So the island was in Spanish hands, but then a French guy, no, not that one.
Oh, wait, hold on. Was that oh yeah, that's Napoleon Dynamite. What's surprising is I actually never seen Napoleon Dynamite, but yet I was shown a few clips of it, so that's actually how I know.
French guy, no, not that one. That one. Turned on the Spanish, took over most of the...
Ooh, hold on. Let me see.
That one. Turned on the Spanish, took over most of the country.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna back up here. So...
Turned on the...
See that this is pretty much Napoleon's French Empire, and this is the first French Empire, since Napoleon was the emperor, and so with that came the Napoleonic Wars, which we would get to whenever Oversimplified releases a video on it. Pretty much, he took over all of Europe, then went to Russia, and was the first to learn the hard way is don't invade Russia during the winter, in which shortly later, a few centuries later, a silly Austrian man who killed so many people in brutal torture chambers decides to invade Russia without any winter clothes, even though heavily studying Napoleon and learning that going off into Russia without proper winter gear is essentially a death sentence for soldiers who really didn't have that much morale left. Well, I mean, the French soldiers had morale. The German soldiers had morale that they were going to win quickly, but when the winter settled in, morale went straight down.
Spanish took over most of the country and captured King Ferdinand VII. And in response, the Spanish colonies in South America started vying for independence. So Spain had a little bit on its hands and also had to leave the islands. And for a couple decades, the islands were left uninhabited except for the penguins, some fishermen, and the gauchos, which are basically like cowboys but cooler and Spanisher. A merchant from Hamburg living in the now independent United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata heard about the feral cattle roaming the Falklands and thought it would be a good way to make some money.
Yeah, Argentina pretty much had some good outports, then something happened, and then all of a sudden, the exports and imports sort of went down. The Argentine economy sort of went down, but it's working its way back up.
So he got permission from both Buenos Aires and the British government to set up trade there as a private venture. Some American ships came down and began hunting whales and seals around the islands, and Vernet wasn't too happy about it. So he asked Buenos Aires for some military assistance in defending the islands, but Buenos Aires said, meh, do it yourself, gave him some weapons, and appointed him governor of the islands. So he seized the U.S. ships and arrested their crews. In response
to be fair, the U.S. at this point was into whaling and didn't really discover the oil fields yet, so Whales were used for oil, so yeah. But at the same time, a little bit overreactive for people who are literally doing their jobs and literally trying to make money. Which, to be fair, in that time was a lot harder than what people think it is now. Now, since, you had to go, since these guys had to hunt for whales just from sight alone, now we don't hunt for whales anymore, but still, like, they didn't have sonar, radar, or any other forms of communication to other ships to check around, figure out directly to see what would be going on. So yeah, it was a lot harder fishing in those times than it probably is now.
Things happened. First, America came down and said, "Nice settlement you have there. Would be a shame if someone destroyed it." And then they destroyed it.
Accurate.
Second, Britain heard Rene had been appointed governor, meaning the United Provinces, actually now the Argentine Confederation, were officially claiming the islands as theirs. So Britain showed up and said, "Hey, didn't you see our plaque?" And since they had more guns, they kicked them off the island. And the
Perfect, and not perfect stuff.
Remained firmly in British hands for the next century. They officially became a crown colony in 1840. Port Stanley became the island's capital in 1845. The cattle from the island weren't worth much, so they imported sheep from Britain in 1851. 2 world wars came and went, and
oh yeah, I forgot that there was a submarine battle in the Falklands during World War One. So like I'm not really up to date with submarine warfare.
This time, the Argentinians never rescinded their claim over the islands. Now it's 1976, and after a couple civil wars, a new brutal military dictatorship.
Yep, military dictatorships it is.
Sponsored by the U.S. fight against communism, has taken.
Be fair in all honesty, that the communist threat was much more of a literal either being taken away your freedom and also in rights to speak out loud against the government, and also that the fact was that America was literally trying to form nations into their puppet states in order to keep a nuclear war from ever happening. So yeah, you can actually thank the U.S. for literally trying so much so to form NATO to trying to keep the Soviet Union from, I don't know, watching nuclear missiles at Europe and literally taking over Europe in a massive wipeout.
Control in Argentina, and by 1981, this guy was in power. The economy had been struggling for a long time.
Oh no. You go from there to there. Yep, that's definitely struggling.
Galtieri had been unable to improve the situation. Now, if you ever find yourself the brutal military leader of a struggling South American country and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries.
He used the same joke in the 100 Hours War, the Football War episode, which you should check it out, but I've reacted to that as well, which I did say that was a repeated joke from this video. But anyways, let's keep on going.
Start a war to distract everyone from their misery. Galtieri knew how popular he would be if he could finally take back Argentina's last Malvinas from the occupying British. There had been proposals to cut British military spending, and the ice patrol vessel HMS Endurance had been withdrawn from the area. So the Argentinians assumed the British may not even bother doing anything about the invasion.
Argentina. This is still a country's colony. You can't expect that Britain wouldn't care about it, even though that the UK were still struggling to hold what remnants came of their empire around this time, but still you can't expect that the British won't react to it.
Easily capturing the largely uninhabited South Georgia island, 600 Argentine troops were sent to the Falklands. The small number of Royal Marines and other British forces stationed there put up a small amount of resistance, but in the end had to surrender to the larger Argentine force. Crowds in Argentina celebrated the news, but they were wrong to assume the British would do nothing, because the person in charge of the United Kingdom at the time was this lady.
I don't know who Margaret Thatcher was, so if someone can explain her to me in the comments down below, I would be most thankful for.
Was a somewhat controversial prime minister, but whether you loved her or hated her, there was no denying that she was tough. Like metal. Iron, for example. She immediately declared an
Then hold on, was she called the Iron Lady? Since I did see his little annotation there.
exclusion zone around the islands and organized for a task force of over 100 ships to set sail for the Falklands. The United Nations expressed concern at the Argentine invasion. All South American nations apart from Chile backed Argentina. And since the United States had propped up the Argentine dictatorship, Reagan went to Thatcher and said, "Could you maybe just let them have the islands?" And
yeah, that's not going to work out. But still, it is a way on how to stop war from breaking out. Which is actually good on Reagan's part. But unfortunately for Reagan, this is not the time for him to see that the British won't respect his offer for peace. Peace for nothing really there.
who said no. Okay, here, have some weapons. Fighting a
Pretty much on how the Americans were helping the British out through wars. In a nutshell.
over 8,000 miles from home was a logistical challenge for the British. They requisitioned civilian cruise ships and containers, and they used British-owned Ascension Island as a forward base. By the time they arrived at the Falklands in May, the Argentine forces had had time to entrench themselves. The first task for the British was to gain control of the seas, which they did easily. On the 2nd of May, a British submarine sank an Argentine cruiser. The sinking was controversial, as it occurred outside the British exclusion zone. It was also the largest loss of life in a single incident during the war.
300 and 200. No, 323 killed. Wow. That's relatively... I want to say that's a... Yeah, that's a... I'm not sure if I'm going to butcher this horribly wrong, but is that a battleship, or is that a destroyer? You guys tell me in the comments below, since I honestly don't know. Don't know ships and stuff.
In response, the Argentine Navy withdrew from the islands.
They withdrew from the islands. I get that the UK has a strong navy, but at the same time, put up more of a little bit of a fight if you're willing to still claim the islands.
The next task for the British was to gain air superiority. While the Argentine Air Force controlled the skies, they were able to inflict considerable damage on the Royal Navy below. Days after the sinking of the General Belgrano, 2 Argentine superétendards carried out a raid on the HMS Sheffield and sank it with an Exocet missile. For weeks, the Argentine Air Force would continue to carry out raids and inflict heavy casualties on the Royal Navy, with British Sea Harriers doing their best to take out as many of the Argentine aircraft as they could. While the battle in the skies raged on, San Carlos was chosen as the best landing site for the British ground forces. An SAS raid took out Argentine defenses on Pebble Island, and the HMS...
Wait, who decided to name an island Pebble Island? That's gotta be the stupidest name for an island that I've heard of. No, wait, hold on, there's Little and Big Massacre Island. So, what am I talking about?
Alacrity sailed through Falkland Sound to flush out any Argentine supply ships. The landings began on May 21st, with Argentine aircraft carrying out full-scale raids on the task force ships taking part in the landing, damaging several and sinking a few. But anti-aircraft cannons and Sea Harriers shot down many of the aircraft in what became a major turning point for air superiority, and a beachhead was successfully formed. Then the ground troops began their movements out of San Carlos, across the north towards Stanley, and south toward the Argentine stronghold at Goose.
So, I just want to question something. So, Britain, out of all places to land, I get that you can try to, make your way across the islands, but considering that if their capital is a port that's right next to the sea, and yes, it might be tougher to get to, at least try and set up an invasion point here and there at the same time, so that way it's much more of a morale loss for the Argentinians.
In the following battles, a clear trend emerged. The Argentine conscripts put up a good fight, and with the rough, muddy terrain, the war was by no means easy for the British. But with highly skilled Royal Marine commanders and parachute regiment troops, the British would often find themselves taking on larger numbers of Argentinian soldiers, but would still come out victorious with minimal casualties. The 14-hour-long battle for Goose Green commenced on the night of May 28th. The battle ended in a decisive British victory, with over 900 Argentinians surrendering. Then, with 5,000 reinforcements arriving from the 5th Infantry Brigade, the British started preparing for their final assault on Stanley. In a series of hard-fought battles, they took control of the hills and mountains surrounding the town, as the Argentine forces withdrew with British ships shelling their positions from offshore. Utterly surrounded, on the 14th of June, the Argentinians surrendered, and the war was over. The 2-month-long war claimed hundreds of lives and left...
He's not wrong. I mean, out of most cases of a war between major countries, I say that this is likely the least amount of casualties I've seen. But the amount of people injured, that seemed rather normal.
Islands strewn with minefields that still pose a problem to this day. Argentina still claims the islands, but in 2013 a referendum was held, and the islanders voted 99.8% in favor of remaining British.
Wait, let me see that again? In favor of British rule? Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that's definitely to the British rule. Oh, if free votes only vote for Argentine rule, yeah, pretty much the British control the Falklands.
8% in favor of remaining British. Plus, oil was just found near the islands, so the British probably aren't going to give them up any...
Wait, did you say oil was found near the islands? Well, I better tell the U.S. about that. It's just... Anyways, so that all the copyright belongs to Oversimplified, and yeah. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment down below if I'm a bad narrator or something, or if you want to complain to me about completely inaccurately saying stuff, go ahead, and yeah, and I'll see y'all later. Goodbye.